Princess Alara stood by the tall window of her palace chamber, staring at the golden spires of Lyrathia that shone under the twin suns. The wind carried scents of flowering trees and buzzing hover drones that moved through the air like tiny metallic bees. Yet, even in this beauty, Alara felt restless. For as long as she could remember, she had been surrounded by stories of humans, strange beings who were clever, bold, and strong. But the kingdom said they were myths, legends, folklore. Alara turned to her advisors who had gathered in the chamber to discuss the day's matters. "Tell me again why humans cannot be real?" she asked, her voice a mix of curiosity and frustration. Lord Virel, a tall man with a silver beard and a solemn expression, cleared his throat. "Princess, humans are tales from the old worlds. No one has seen one in thousands of years. They belong in stories, not in reality. We should focus on matters of Lyrathia, not myths." Alara frowned. "But if humans were real once, why not now? We believe in stars we cannot touch, yet we doubt a being clever enough to survive among the stars." Her words hung in the air. The other advisors shifted uneasily, clearly uncomfortable with her insistence. But Alara's fascination with humans had grown stronger each year. She spent hours in the royal library, reading every scroll, every artifact, every story that mentioned them. Each tale described humans as resilient, intelligent, and daring. They were problem solvers, inventors, and explorers. The more she read, the more she believed they could exist. One day, while walking through the library's grand hall, Alara noticed a small object glowing faintly on a pedestal. It was not part of the collection she remembered. Curious, she stepped closer. The object was a cube, small enough to fit in one hand with smooth metallic surfaces and soft light that pulsed gently. Alara reached out and touched it. Immediately, the cube sprang to life. A holographic figure appeared, hovering in the air. "Greetings," the figure said. Its voice was calm, yet filled with energy. "I am Kyle. I come from a world called Earth." Alara's eyes widened. She had seen many holograms of animals, planets, and machines, but none had ever spoken directly to her. "Earth?" she whispered. "Is this real?" The figure nodded. "Yes, I am a human. I have traveled far to send this message. Your stories are true, Princess. Humans are real, and we are clever, resourceful, and always seeking to learn. I wish to show you how we solve problems." Alara's heart raced. Could this be real? Could humans truly exist beyond stories? She looked around the library. The advisors were nowhere in sight. They would never believe this without seeing it. For hours, Kale's hologram told stories of human ingenuity. He showed how humans built machines to fly in the skies, communicate across continents, and survive harsh environments. He described inventions that could clean water, generate energy, and even cure diseases. Alara listened, captivated by each tale. But it was not just the inventions that fascinated her. It was the way Kale thought. Humans did not rely only on strength or power. They used their minds. They solved problems with creativity and persistence. They worked together, learning from mistakes and from one another. Alara realized she wanted to see this human with her own eyes. She wanted to meet him, learn from him, and understand how someone could be so clever. As if reading her thoughts, Kale's hologram said, "If you are ready, Princess, I can come to you. The stories will become reality." Alara's pulse quickened. "Yes," she said, barely able to contain her excitement. "I am ready." The cube glowed brighter, sending streams of light across the library walls. For a moment, the room seemed to vanish, replaced by a swirl of colors. Alara felt her heart leap as the energy filled the air. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. Before her stood a man, tall and lean, with eyes that seemed to shine with curiosity. His hair was dark and slightly windswept, and he wore clothing unlike anything she had seen. Practical, sturdy, yet comfortable. He smiled at her. "Princess Alara?" he asked. "I am Kale. It is an honor to meet you." Alara stepped back, astonished. This was no hologram. This was real. The human was standing in her library, breathing, moving, and alive. "Yes," she said softly. I never thought this day would come." Kale looked around, taking in the grand hall, the tall shelves and the rows of scrolls. "Your library is incredible," he said. "So much knowledge, so many stories. I can see why humans have been spoken of with such admiration." Alara felt a thrill of excitement. You really are here. The humans are real." Kale nodded. "Yes, and I am here to help you see what humans can do, not through force, but through thought, creativity, and cooperation." Over the next days, Ilara and Kyle explored the palace and the city beyond. The humans of Lyrathia had built machines that floated in the air, powered by energy drawn from the sun and the wind. Yet even with all their technology, the people of Lyrathia faced challenges, sometimes simple, sometimes complex. Kyle began to show Ilara ways to solve problems that no one had thought of. One morning, they visited the city's water supply. The pipes were old, leaky, and inefficient. Ilara watched as Kale examined the system. He studied the flow, measured the pressure, and spoke quietly to himself. Then he sketched diagrams on a small tablet, showing how to redirect the water and reinforce the pipes. "See?" he said, turning to Ilara. "Humans approach problems by thinking carefully, testing ideas, and working together. Strength alone cannot solve this. You need planning, patience, and creativity." Ilara nodded, fascinated. She realized that humans were more than just clever. They were adaptable. They could face challenges without panic, find solutions where none seemed to exist, and turn obstacles into opportunities. News of Kale's arrival began to spread through the city. Citizens gathered to see him, amazed at this being from another world. Some were skeptical, whispering that humans could be dangerous. But Kale did nothing to frighten them. He fixed broken machines, helped children with small experiments, and demonstrated simple inventions that made life easier. Even the palace guards, who were initially wary, began to trust him. They noticed that he never used violence, never boasted, and always thought carefully before acting. He was unlike anyone they had ever met. Ilara felt a sense of hope growing inside her. If humans could exist, and if Kale could show the ways of their minds, perhaps her kingdom could learn from them. Perhaps Lyrathia could become a place where creativity, intelligence, and courage were celebrated above all else. One evening, as the twin suns set and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Ilara and Kale stood on the palace balcony. Below, the city lights began to twinkle and the air was filled with the hum of hover drones and distant laughter. "Princess," Kale said softly, "humans are not perfect. We make mistakes, we fail, we stumble, but we never stop learning. That is what makes us strong." Ilara looked at him, her eyes wide with understanding. I think that is what I have always felt about humans. They are more than myths. They are possibility." Kyle smiled. "Exactly. And now we can explore that possibility together." As the stars began to appear in the night sky, Ilara felt a surge of excitement. The stories she had loved, the myths she had cherished, they were no longer just words in a book. They were real, walking, breathing, thinking beside her. The morning air in Lyrathia was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of blooming silver flowers that lined the palace terraces. Citizens began their daily routines, moving through the bustling streets in sleek hover cars, while merchants shouted greetings and offered colorful produce from distant planets. Yet a sense of anticipation hung in the air. Word had spread quickly. Something extraordinary had arrived at the palace. Princess Ilara walked through the central courtyard, her robes brushing the polished stone. She was not alone. Kale, the human warrior who had amazed her in the library, was beside her, observing the city with keen interest. Though he had only been in Lyrathia for a few days, he seemed to notice everything: the patterns of traffic, the flow of water in fountains, the way people interacted with machines. "Everything seems efficient," Kale said thoughtfully. But there are places where small improvements could make life much easier. Ilara smiled. That is why I brought you here. I want the city to see what humans can do. I want them to understand that we can learn from you. Kyle nodded, his expression serious. Then let's show them. Not with strength, but with thinking and ingenuity. The palace guards watched closely. They had been cautious since Kyle's arrival, unsure whether to trust a being from a world they had only read about in myths. But so far, he had caused no harm. Instead, he had repaired broken devices, helped scholars organize ancient knowledge, and even helped children construct simple flying machines. Today, Kyle would demonstrate human ingenuity to the people of Lyrathia for the first time. Their first stop was the city's transportation hub. Hover cars moved smoothly along magnetic tracks, but traffic jams were a common problem. Kyle studied the flow for several minutes, moving among the vehicles, observing where delays occurred. Your tracks are well built, he said to Ilara, but the system could be improved by staggering departures and using simple sensors to prevent congestion. Ilara raised an eyebrow. Sensors? Kale smiled. Small devices that detect movement and adjust traffic automatically. Humans call them smart systems. Before Ilara could respond, Kale pulled a small metallic device from his bag. It was no larger than her palm, yet it glowed softly. He placed it on one of the tracks. Immediately, tiny lights blinked along the path, and a soft hum vibrated through the air. Hover cars slowed slightly in crowded areas and sped up in empty ones. Within moments, the traffic jam cleared, and the vehicles moved smoothly again. The crowd watching from balconies gasped. Some whispered, "It is magic." Others muttered, "It is impossible." Ilara laughed quietly. "It is not magic. It is human ingenuity." Kale looked at the citizens and bowed slightly. "Thank you for your patience. This is only a small example of what humans can do when we observe, think, and apply our knowledge." The city erupted into applause. Children ran to him, asking questions about the small device. Merchants asked if they could install similar systems in their trade routes. Even the palace guards, still cautious, looked impressed. Next, Kale guided Ilara and the citizens to the central energy hub. Here, massive turbines converted sunlight into electricity, powering the entire city. Yet some older sections of Lyrathia still experienced occasional blackouts. Kale studied the system carefully. He examined the turbines, checked the flow of energy, and traced lines of power with his hands. Then, without hesitation, he began adjusting small panels, repositioning mirrors, and recalibrating energy sensors. Within an hour, the entire hub was running more efficiently. Lights shone brighter across the city, and energy shortages became nearly non-existent. Engineers who had been skeptical before now watched in awe, taking notes and asking Kale questions. "How do you know all this?" one engineer asked. Kale smiled. "Humans like to observe, learn, and experiment. We do not fear failure. Each mistake teaches us something new. That is why we can find solutions quickly." Ilara felt a sense of pride. Her people were seeing what she had always known. Humans were extraordinary, not because they were strong, or large or powerful, but because they could think, create, and inspire. As the day went on, Kale and Ilara moved through different parts of the city. In the marketplace, Kale noticed vendors struggling to organize goods efficiently. He quickly devised a system of color-coded baskets and small movable carts, which allowed the merchants to sell their products faster and with less effort. In the farming district, Kale helped engineers adjust irrigation systems, ensuring that every plant received the right amount of water. The crops flourished, and the farmers marveled at the improvements. Even in the palace itself, Kale's influence was visible. He suggested ways to streamline the storage of ancient scrolls, organized laboratories for better experiments, and introduced new methods for communication among the royal staff. Throughout it all, Princess Ilara watched him closely. She admired not just his intelligence, but his patience and humility. Kyle never rushed. He never demanded attention. He simply observed, analyzed, and guided others to solutions. By late afternoon, a crowd had gathered in the palace courtyard. Citizens from all over the city wanted to see the human who could solve problems without force. Kyle stood on a small platform, addressing them. "People of Lyrathia," he began, "I am not here to take control, nor to replace your ways. I'm here to share ideas. Humans are curious, adaptable, and inventive. We face challenges with creativity and cooperation. That is our strength." The crowd listened in silence, captivated by his words. Then slowly they began to clap, cheer, and smile. Children waved eagerly, some calling out questions. Ilara stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "Citizens of Lyrathia, this is Kale. He comes from a world far away, and he shows us the truth of human ingenuity. We have much to learn from him, and together, we can make our kingdom stronger, smarter, and more creative." The crowd erupted in applause again, louder this time. Kyle looked at Ilara and nodded, a small smile on his face. "Princess, your people are eager to learn. That is the greatest gift a kingdom can offer." As evening fell, Kyle and Ilara returned to the palace balcony. The city lights twinkled below, reflecting off the river that wound through the streets like a silver ribbon. "Kyle," Ilara said, "you have done more than I imagined. The people already respect you. Some are still cautious, but they will see what humans can do." Kyle looked thoughtful. "It takes time for change to be accepted, but you, Princess, have the right heart. You see not just the present, but the possibilities. That is what humans admire: vision, curiosity, and courage." Ilara smiled. "And I admire humans for the same reasons. You are more than folklore. You are real." Kale's eyes sparkled. "Then let us continue to explore, learn, and create. There is so much we can do together." For the first time, Ilara felt a sense of hope that went beyond curiosity. She imagined a city where every problem could be solved with thought and cooperation, where people worked together instead of waiting for luck or chance, and where humans and Lyrathians could learn from one another. The twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city. Ilara watched them, her mind racing with possibilities. With Kale's arrival, her kingdom would never be the same. Not because of battles or conquest, but because of ideas, ingenuity, and the simple power of human creativity. And as the stars began to appear one by one, Ilara realized something remarkable. The myths she had cherished all her life were not just stories. They were promises of a future she could now touch, learn from, and share with her people. The human warrior had arrived, and with him came not weapons, not armies, but something far more powerful: the spark of imagination, the courage to think differently, and the proof that humans, real humans, could change the world. The morning sun rose over Lyrathia, casting soft orange light over the city's spires. The kingdom was quiet but alive, humming with the soft whir of hover cars and the distant chatter of merchants preparing for the day. Princess Ilara stood on the palace balcony looking over the streets below. Kyle was already waiting beside her, his eyes scanning the city as if reading its every problem. Today, the princess thought, would be the day to test the limits of human ingenuity. "Ilara," Kale said, "your city is well planned, but every system has weak points. Today we will face a challenge that will show your people what humans can do, not with power, but with thinking and cooperation." Ilara raised an eyebrow. "A challenge? What kind of challenge?" Kyle smiled. "Something that cannot be solved by force or luck. Something that requires ideas." Before Ilara could ask more, a loud alarm echoed through the city. From her balcony she could see citizens rushing toward the river, where the water level had risen unusually fast overnight. The river that ran through Lyrathia's heart threatened to overflow, flooding the lower districts. "Princess," Kale said calmly, "we must act. This is our trial." Ilara's heart pounded. The people were in danger, but Kale remained composed. She realized that was the first lesson humans offered: stay calm, even in the face of chaos. Kale moved quickly, gathering a small group of engineers and citizens willing to help. "We need to organize," he said. First, we will build temporary barriers along the riverbanks. Next, we will divert some water using existing canals. Finally, we will alert citizens in the lower districts to move to safety. People looked at him in awe. They had never seen a human so confident, so precise, yet so gentle in giving instructions. Alara followed Kale down to the river, where the water already lapped dangerously close to the streets. Kale examined the flow carefully, his eyes moving rapidly from one section of the river to another. Then he spoke, clearly and decisively. We can use sandbags, but not just anywhere. Place them in triangular patterns to hold more weight. Use wooden boards to reinforce weak spots. Citizens work together. This is not a battle, it's a puzzle. Under Kale's guidance, people began working. Children carried small bags of sand to the edges, while adults arranged boards and ropes in ways they had never imagined. Kale walked among them, giving tips and encouragement, never touching the materials himself. He simply showed them how to think differently. Hours passed, and slowly, the floodwaters began to recede. The temporary barriers held, and canals successfully diverted the river's flow. Citizens cheered as they realized they had done it, not because someone used strength or authority, but because they had worked together, following Kale's strategies. Alara's eyes glimmered with pride. You did, she said, smiling at Kale. You taught them to think, to cooperate, and they succeeded. Kale nodded. Humans solve problems by observing carefully, planning carefully, and working together. Anyone can do it. It is not about strength. It is about ingenuity. After the flood crisis, Kale suggested improvements to the city's canals and drainage system, ensuring that future storms could be managed even more effectively. Engineers took notes eagerly, inspired by his methods. The next challenge came unexpectedly. A rare alien species, the Lumerians, who lived on the outskirts of the city, had wandered into the marketplace. These creatures were gentle but curious, their glowing bodies leaving faint trails of light. They began exploring stalls, knocking over goods unintentionally. The merchants panicked, fearing damage to their valuable produce. Kale stepped forward. Do not fear, he said calmly. We will solve this peacefully. He quickly observed the Lumerians' behavior, noting patterns in their movement and their reactions to sound and light. Then he gathered some crates, ribbons, and soft lights from the market. In less than an hour, he had constructed a temporary pathway, guiding the Lumerians away from the stalls and back toward their habitat. The merchants were amazed. You did this without harming them, one exclaimed. Kale smiled. Violence is not the only way. Observation, creativity, and cooperation can solve almost any problem. Alara realized that every day with Kale was a lesson. He was teaching the kingdom something far more valuable than inventions. He was teaching them a new way of thinking. That evening, Kyle and Alara returned to the palace. The princess could see how the citizens' attitudes had changed. People were no longer afraid of challenges. They were eager to solve problems themselves. Engineers discussed ideas excitedly. Children experimented with small machines in the streets, and even the palace staff began suggesting improvements for their own duties. Alara, Kale said, humans are not just clever. We inspire others to think differently, to believe that they can solve problems. That is our true strength. Alara nodded. I see it now. They look at the world differently because of you. They are learning not just from what you do, but how you think. Kyle smiled. Exactly. And that is how humans change the world, one mind at a time. The next morning brought another challenge, though this time it was planned. Kale proposed a project to improve the city's energy grid. Some districts still experienced occasional blackouts, especially during peak hours. Kale suggested a human-inspired solution, a combination of energy storage devices, smart sensors, and community participation. Engineers were skeptical at first. This will take months, one said. It cannot be done quickly. Kale shook his head. With observation, testing, and teamwork, it can be done faster than you think. Humans always start by understanding the problem fully before acting. Then, step by step, solutions emerge. Under his guidance, teams worked together. Sensors were installed to monitor energy flow in real time. Citizens were taught to adjust their energy consumption at peak hours. Old turbines were repaired and recalibrated, and storage systems were added to ensure that excess energy could be used later. Within a few days, the improvements began to show results. Blackouts became rare, energy flowed smoothly, and the city began to shine brighter than ever before. The citizens cheered, realizing that careful planning and teamwork could achieve what they had thought impossible. Meanwhile, Princess Alara observed Kyle closely. She noticed how he never became frustrated, even when plans failed temporarily. He simply analyzed the problem, adjusted the approach, and tried again. This patience, she realized, was just as important as his intelligence. That evening, Ilara and Kale stood on the balcony once more. The city lights reflected in the river below, dancing like tiny stars. "Kale," Ilara said, "you have done more than I imagined. The citizens are not only inspired, they are changing themselves. They think differently now, and I see a spark of curiosity and courage I have never seen before." Kyle looked out at the city, his expression calm but thoughtful. Humans do not seek to dominate or to rule. We seek to understand, to create, and to inspire. When we share that approach, others can learn, and together, we accomplish far more than we could alone. Ilara felt a sense of pride mixed with awe. This was the human way, she realized, a combination of intelligence, patience, observation, and cooperation. It was unlike anything her kingdom had experienced before, and she understood why humans had become legends in so many worlds. The next day brought yet another trial, though it was smaller but no less significant. A group of children wanted to build a flying toy that could glide over the city. In the past, such attempts had failed, leaving broken devices and frustrated young inventors. Kyle guided them patiently, showing them principles of balance, airflow, and simple mechanics. Within hours, the children had built a working glider. The joy on their faces was unmatched. "Ilara," Kyle said, smiling at the children, "this is just as important as solving big problems. Teaching young minds to think, experiment, and create ensures that the future will be full of innovation." Ilara nodded, understanding that Kale's influence went far beyond temporary fixes. He was planting seeds of curiosity and intelligence that would grow for generations. By the end of the week, the kingdom had experienced a transformation. Citizens moved with purpose, thinking creatively. Engineers collaborated more openly. Children experimented without fear, and the palace staff embraced new ideas. And through it all, Kale continued to guide, inspire, and teach, not through force but through example, patience, and ingenuity. Princess Ilara realized a profound truth. Humans were not simply strong or brave. Their true power lay in their ability to think differently, to inspire others, and to turn challenges into opportunities. Lyrathia was changing, not because of a single person, but because a human had shown them how to see the world in a new way. As the twin suns set, casting a golden glow over the city, Ilara felt hope for the first time in her life. Not hope for adventure or fame, but hope for a kingdom where creativity, intelligence, and courage could flourish. And beside her, Kyle stood quietly, a reminder that humans were no longer folklore, they were real. And real humans, she realized, could change everything. The morning sun rose over Lyrathia, casting a soft golden glow over the city. For the first time in many weeks, the streets were alive with a sense of purpose and energy. Citizens moved confidently. Children played while experimenting with small inventions, and even merchants had begun applying clever organizational methods introduced by Kyle. The human warrior's influence was visible everywhere. Princess Ilara walked through the palace gardens with Kyle. Flowers of every color swayed in the morning breeze, and the sound of water from the fountains filled the air. Yet, despite the beauty, Ilara sensed that the kingdom's greatest trial was still ahead. Kyle, she said. You have inspired the city in so many ways. But I feel there is a bigger challenge coming. Something that will test not only your ingenuity but the way the citizens think. Kale nodded, his expression serious. I have noticed it as well. The planet's weather patterns have been unusual. There is a massive dust storm forming to the east. It will reach the city within 2 days if it continues its course. We must prepare. Alara felt a shiver run down her spine. Dust storms were dangerous. They could damage buildings, ruin crops, and threaten the lives of citizens. Yet, she also knew that this challenge was exactly what the kingdom needed, to test everything they had learned from Kale. The first step was alerting the citizens. Kale suggested using the city's communication systems combined with public messengers to spread the news. But instead of just warning them, he encouraged the people to participate in preparations. Humans face challenges by working together, Kale explained. If everyone has a role and everyone understands the plan, the storm can be managed without panic. Ilara agreed and announced a citywide effort. Citizens were asked to reinforce their homes, help build shelters, and secure crops and goods. Engineers coordinated the placement of temporary windbreaks, while children assisted by stacking lightweight barriers in safe areas. At first, some people were skeptical. How can a single human guide us through something so dangerous? One elder asked. We have weather systems far stronger than we can control. Kale listened calmly. I am not controlling the storm, he said. I am helping you think about how to prepare. Humans do not fight nature. They adapt to it. That is our strength. Over the next 24 hours, the city transformed into a hive of activity. Temporary shelters were built, canals were adjusted to prevent flooding from potential rains, and emergency supply stations were set up across districts. Citizens worked together, guided by Kyle's instructions, discovering solutions they had never imagined before. Alara watched in awe as her people embraced the challenge. Engineers applied new methods to strengthen walls using lightweight materials. Farmers reinforced their greenhouses, while merchants organized stockpiles of food and water. Even the palace staff contributed, ensuring that the royal residence could act as a safe hub for citizens in need. As the storm approached, the sky turned a dull gray with swirling clouds stretching far into the distance. The wind picked up, carrying dust and small debris. Some citizens grew nervous, but Kale remained calm, walking among them and offering encouragement. Observe the storm, he said. Notice its patterns. Use what you have built to stay safe. Remember, preparation and cooperation are stronger than fear. When the storm finally hit, the city was ready. Barricades held firm, shelters provided safety, and citizens knew where to go. Kyle moved quietly through the city, checking on each group, giving advice and adjusting plans as necessary. For hours, the winds roared, carrying clouds of dust and sand across the city. Yet thanks to Kyle's guidance and the citizens' efforts, damage was minimal. Crops were saved, homes remained intact, and no one was harmed. When the storm finally passed, the sky cleared, revealing a city that had weathered a challenge far greater than most had imagined possible. Citizens poured into the streets, cheering and clapping for one another. Engineers, farmers, and merchants embraced, realizing that they had done it together. And in the midst of the celebration, Kale stood beside Princess Ilara, smiling quietly. You see, Princess, he said, humans do not need to fight. We adapt, we plan, and we work together. That is how we overcome challenges. Ilara nodded, her eyes shining. You have changed the way my people see themselves. They are no longer afraid of difficulties. They face them with courage and creativity. And they trust you, not because of your strength, but because of your mind. The impact of the storm went beyond safety and survival. Citizens had learned to think, to organize, and to cooperate in ways they had never done before. The younger generation, in particular, was inspired by Kale's methods, eager to experiment, innovate, and find new solutions to old problems. The following days, Kale worked with engineers to improve the city's infrastructure. Water channels were strengthened to prevent flooding. Communication systems were upgraded for emergency alerts, and public spaces were redesigned to encourage collaboration and innovation. Every improvement reflected human ingenuity applied thoughtfully and practically. The Palace Council, once skeptical, began to see the truth as well. Advisors who had doubted Kale's abilities now openly praised his ideas. Even Lord Varel, who had resisted the notion of humans as anything more than myth, admitted, "This human has shown us that thinking differently can achieve more than brute force or tradition ever could." Ilara realized that Kale's greatest gift to Larathia was not just his inventions or strategies. It was a shift in mindset. The people were no longer limited by old habits or fear. They were ready to think creatively, solve problems, and embrace challenges with confidence. One evening, as the twin suns set, Kale and Ilara walked along the riverbanks, now strengthened and clean after the storm. Citizens were busy experimenting with new ideas, building small machines, and learning from one another. The city hummed with energy and optimism. "Kyle," Ilara said softly, "you have given my people more than safety or new methods. You have given them confidence. They believe in themselves now, and that is priceless." Kyle smiled. "Humans can inspire, Princess. But the desire to learn must exist already. Your people were ready. They just needed guidance." Ilara nodded thoughtfully. "You have changed perceptions, Kyle. Humans were once seen as myths, stories for children. Now they are a model for what we can become." Kyle glanced at the horizon, where the first stars of the night were appearing. Every kingdom, every civilization has myths, but when one of those myths is real, it can inspire change. That is what humans do best. We take the impossible and show that it can be done. Ilara looked at him, understanding his words deeply. "And you have shown us that humans are not just clever. They are capable of inspiring others to think differently, to work together, to solve problems without fear." Kyle nodded. "Exactly. That is the power of humanity. Not strength, not conquest, not domination, but curiosity, ingenuity, and cooperation." Over the next weeks, Larathia continued to transform. Citizens designed clever tools for everyday life. Young inventors built flying devices, and engineers collaborated on citywide improvements. Even the Palace Council embraced Kale's methods, using observation, experimentation, and discussion to make better decisions. Ilara realized that the kingdom had entered a new era. Humans were no longer folklore. They were symbols of possibility, proof that ingenuity, patience, and collaboration could achieve wonders. And Kyle, the warrior who had arrived quietly but confidently, had been the spark that lit this change. 1. Afternoon, Ilara invited Kyle to the palace balcony to watch the city below. Children flew small gliders they had built themselves. Citizens collaborated on new energy systems, and merchants experimented with better organization of goods. The streets were alive with creativity and optimism. "Kale," Ilara said, "you have done more than I imagined. The city sees humans differently now. They see us not as myths, but as guides for what we can achieve ourselves." Kale smiled. "That is the true lesson, Princess. Humans are not just examples, they are teachers. And the most important lesson is that anyone can learn to think creatively, work together, and solve problems." As the twin suns set, casting long shadows over the city, Ilara felt a deep sense of pride and hope. Larathia had been transformed, not by force, not by power, but by ideas, collaboration, and the courage to embrace change. She looked at Kale, the human warrior who had once been a legend, a myth. Now he was real, and his presence had forever changed the kingdom. "Ilara," Kale said quietly, "there is still much to explore. Humans are curious by nature, and curiosity never ends. But what we have done here, this is only the beginning." Ilara nodded, feeling the truth of his words. She understood now that humans were more than clever or bold. They were catalysts for growth, inspiration, and transformation. And with Kyle's guidance, Larathia had entered a new age, one defined by ingenuity, courage, and hope. The city below sparkled as night fell. Citizens worked together, experimented, and learned. And high above, on the palace balcony, Princess, Ilara and Kale looked on, knowing that the folklore of humanity had become real, and that real humans could change everything. The sun rose over Lyrathia, casting long, warm beams across the city. Birds sang softly from the palace gardens, and the streets below were alive with citizens moving purposefully, their minds busy with ideas and invention. The kingdom had changed. It was no longer a city that relied solely on tradition. It was alive with creativity, curiosity, and hope. Princess Ilara stood on the balcony of the palace, looking down at the streets below. Children flew gliders they had built, merchants experimented with new ways to organize their goods, and engineers worked together on small machines that would make life easier. Everywhere she looked, she could see the effects of Kale's influence, not just in the inventions themselves, but in the minds of her people. Kale stood beside her, watching quietly. His presence had become familiar, comforting even, yet there was a quiet understanding between them that his journey would not last forever. Humans were travelers by nature, and soon he would move on to other worlds. "Ilara," Kale said softly, "look at your city. You have done something extraordinary. Your people are thinking differently now. They are curious, inventive, and confident. That is the true reward." Ilara smiled. "And it is because of you, Kale. You have shown us that humans are more than myths. You have shown us how to think, how to solve problems, and how to inspire others." Kale shook his head. "I have only guided. The real work came from them. From you, Princess, and your citizens. Humans can inspire, but the change must come from within." The day was filled with activity. Kale helped citizens complete several ongoing projects. Engineers worked on a network of small energy storage units which could store excess sunlight and distribute it during cloudy days. Farmers experimented with vertical gardens to grow more food in less space. Children collaborated on small wind-powered vehicles that could travel along the city's magnetic tracks. Kale moved among them, observing, offering guidance, and encouraging new ideas. His presence was calm but energizing. Every person he spoke to seem to think more clearly, consider alternatives, and approach problems with curiosity rather than fear. By midday, Ilara gathered the council in the palace chamber. The advisors who had once doubted Kale now looked upon him with respect and admiration. "Kale," Lord Viral said, his voice filled with sincerity, "I admit I was wrong. Humans are not just folklore. You have shown us that your ideas, patience, and ingenuity can change the world." Kale bowed respectfully. "Thank you, Lord Viral. Humans are not perfect and we do not have all the answers. But we can inspire others to think differently, to solve problems, and to grow together. That is what I hope to leave behind." The council nodded, and Ilara felt a deep sense of pride. Lyrathia had embraced a new way of thinking, a way inspired not by myths or stories, but by the presence of a real human warrior. That afternoon, Kale and Ilara walked through the central plaza, where citizens had gathered for a festival celebrating creativity and innovation. Children demonstrated small inventions they had created under Kale's guidance. Merchants displayed clever tools and machines that improved daily life. Engineers showcased new designs for sustainable energy and transportation. Ilara looked around, in awe. The festival was not just a display of inventions, it was a celebration of curiosity, imagination, and human-inspired problem-solving. Citizens smiled, shared ideas, and encouraged one another. The kingdom was alive with innovation. Kale knelt to speak with a group of children who had built a small glider. "This is excellent," he said. "You applied what you learned, tested your ideas, and made something that works. That is the human way. Observe, experiment, and improve." The children beamed with pride, their excitement infectious. Ilara watched them and realized that Kale had given them more than guidance. He had given them confidence. They believed they could create, solve problems, and explore ideas without fear of failure. As the sun began to set, casting warm golds and pinks across the city, Kale turned to Ilara. Princess, my time here is coming to an end. Humans are travelers. We move from world to world, sharing ideas, learning, and inspiring. But the change you have embraced will remain. Your kingdom is ready to grow, to innovate, and to face challenges with creativity and courage. Ilara's heart ached at the thought of losing him. Kale, you have done more than anyone could imagine. The city, the council, the people, they have all learned because of you. I don't know how to thank you. Kale smiled gently. No, thanks are needed. The true reward is seeing your people discover what they are capable of. Humans leave gifts that cannot be carried. Ideas, inspiration, and knowledge. That is what I leave for Lerathia. Ilara nodded, understanding. Then go, Kyle, knowing that you have changed our world forever. That evening, the citizens gathered to bid farewell to Kale. Children waved small gliders, engineers held models of machines, and merchants displayed tools inspired by his guidance. Even the council came forward to express their gratitude. Kale stood on a small platform looking at the crowd. People of Lerathia, he said, I have come from a far world, and I have shared what humans can do. But the true work is yours. Continue to think, create, and explore. Face challenges with curiosity and courage. That is the greatest gift a kingdom can give itself. The crowd cheered, a mixture of excitement, admiration, and hope. They had learned that humans were real, that myths could become reality, and that the power to change their world lay not in magic or force, but in ideas and cooperation. After the farewell, Kale activated the interstellar portal that had brought him to Lerathia. A soft light shimmered across the plaza, and the portal hummed with energy. Ilara stepped forward, placing a hand on his arm. Kyle, she said softly, thank you for everything. You have changed Lerathia, and you have changed me. We will never forget what you have taught us. Kyle smiled, a mixture of pride and warmth in his eyes. And I will never forget this kingdom. Humans are inspired by those who are curious, brave, and willing to learn. You, Princess, and your people have shown me that. Remember, the true power lies in your minds and your hearts. With a final nod, Kale stepped into the portal. A brilliant light enveloped him, and then he was gone, leaving behind a city transformed and a kingdom forever changed. For a long moment, Princess Ilara stood in silence, gazing at the glowing portal, as it faded. Then she turned to the city below. Citizens continued to work, play, and innovate, their energy vibrant and unafraid. She realized that Kyle had left more than knowledge. He had left a legacy. Lerathia would continue to grow, guided by the principles he had shown: observation, creativity, collaboration, and courage. Humans were no longer just folklore. They were symbols of possibility, inspiration, and the power to change the world through thought and imagination. In the days that followed, Lerathia flourished. The city's energy systems worked flawlessly. Crops thrived, and citizens embraced learning as a daily part of life. Children built gliders and machines, engineers collaborated across disciplines, and merchants organized trade in creative ways. Even the Palace Council applied human-inspired problem-solving to governance, making decisions with careful thought and planning. Princess Ilara often walked among her people, watching them experiment, solve problems, and share ideas. She saw the spark of curiosity and courage in every citizen, and she knew that Kale's influence would continue for generations. One evening, she returned to the palace balcony and looked at the stars above. She thought of Kale, the human warrior who had once been a myth, now a reality. She knew he was traveling to other worlds, inspiring other civilizations, and spreading human ingenuity wherever he went. Ilara whispered softly, "Thank you, Kale. You have shown us what humans can do and what we can become." The stars twinkled above as if answering her words, and a sense of possibility filled the night. Lerathia was no longer a kingdom of tradition alone. It was a kingdom of ideas, creativity, and courage. And it would continue to grow, inspired by the humans who had once been folklore but were now very real. The kingdom had been transformed. not through force or conquest, but through thought, collaboration, and imagination. Humans had taught them a new way to face challenges, and in doing so had changed the course of history. Princess Ilara smiled, knowing that the legends of humanity had come alive, and that the spark Kale had lit would burn brightly for generations to come. And high above, beyond the stars, Kale traveled onward, leaving a trail of inspiration, proof that humans, clever, brave, and ingenious, could change worlds without ever raising a weapon. The kingdom of Lyrathia would never forget.